Hello, everybody. Welcome to Unveiling the Truth. I'm your host, Mark Howitt, and today is February 1st, 2014, the first day of February, and I'm sure that everybody's burning snow wherever they can. That seems to be what's been in the news lately. People have been packing snow and burning it, attributing it to chemtrails and other things like that. I'm sure that there's going to be some studies into it. I haven't really found out if there is any, but it's definitely interesting. That's happening, definitely. I've been really busy actually researching into the fluoridation issue, as well as working on a documentary on the issue as well. I was actually planning on making a documentary on fluoride based on an interview I did last year in June with one of Canada's leading experts, if not the leading expert in Canada on fluoridation, Peter Van Caulart. The interview went very well. Lots of information was discussed, and I felt it would be good to put it into a documentary format, which is what I mentioned to him when I interviewed him as well, that I would be eventually turning it into a film. So this whole week I've been really busy working on that documentary. I wanted to get it done for today's broadcast, so I really worked hard at it, but I couldn't get it done. Sorry, folks. Otherwise, you get to see a new documentary. But I knew a lot about fluoride before looking into the making the documentary and doing all the editing and sourcing everything and all that. But after looking into the subject a little bit more, I learned so much more. It's insane how much information there is about fluoride and fluoridation. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, which is why I called this episode The Truth About Fluoride, because I want to get to the truth of things and try to present you guys with a clear picture, with some credible information, as well as some tips and tricks into how to get it removed from your community's water supply. I'm sure that you've seen a lot of protests in regards to fluoride, whether in your community or in another community, or you've seen it online on the internet. It's insane how many people oppose fluoride, and it's still in a majority of North America's drinking water. Mind you, there is a lot of communities that have had it removed, but again, there's still a lot of fluoridation going on. It's interesting to note that Europe is 98% fluoride free, and yet in North America, in Canada, United States, there's still heavy fluoridation levels. So I want to show you guys something very, very interesting here, which should give you guys a little bit of an idea on just how important this fluoridation issue is. Now I've got my web browser here loaded, and I'm going to go to Google. And I'm just going to type the word fluoride in. Fluoride. Fluoride. And let's see what we get here. Now, I'm not going to look at the web results. I'm going to look at the image results. And take a look at what we have here. Alright, we have, first picture is dentures. Second picture here is a comic about people dumping poison into water mains. Then it says, tap into a healthier smile, with a very sinister looking image there. But the point I'm trying to make is that most of these images, I would say a good 80% of these images, if not more, are against fluoride. And that's just the simple word fluoride in Google. Alright? So that's got to tell you something. That's got to say that people are opposed to this. We know what's going on. We know the truth. So why is it still in the water supply? Now, I could just keep going with this list here, and I'm telling you, it just goes on and on and on and on, of just negative images, negative news reports on how bad fluoride is. There is some websites that are saying that fluoride's good, and most of them are dentistry websites. But as you can see with your own two eyes, as proven, negative fluoride. That's the image people have about it, and that's why there's people protesting it all over the place. in many communities in the fluoridated countries that still have water fluoridation. Now, these countries include United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, United States, and some places in South America as well. But for the most part, fluoridation has been ceased in a lot of countries because they know the truth about it. And that's what we're going to do today on today's show, is find out the truth about fluoride. So one thing, when we're discussing the fluoride issue, we need to determine and distinguish the differences between fluoridation. Now, there is a big difference in fluoridation, actually. First one I would say would be dental fluoridation. Now, that is a process where you go to the dentist and they apply fluoride topically to your teeth. You don't ingest it. However, some dentists do recommend ingestion of fluoride. And we'll get to that later on what risks are associated with the ingestion and consumption of fluoride and in taking it into your body. Now, with dental fluoride, they claim that it hardens the teeth. Fluoridation of the teeth, you brush your teeth with fluoride or sodium fluoride, and it strengthens the enamel of your teeth. That's the claim. That's what they say. I believe that it does strengthen your teeth based on the research that I've looked into. It definitely does calcify bone and other organs that are susceptible to that, the tissues in your body that are essentially attracted to those kind of materials. The other kind of fluoridation is water fluoridation, and that's where you take fluoridation chemicals and put them into the drinking water supply, and this is said to strengthen teeth so that you have fewer cavities in the communities that are fluoridated. By consuming it, and essentially the fluorides go into your teeth. But the problem with that is that when you consume fluoride, it's definitely not going to just your teeth. It's going to several other parts of your body. It's absorbing into many tissues. You're drinking the water. Your body is absorbing that in many different levels, in many different areas of the body. And some of these places where it accumulates is in the bones, in your teeth, in your pineal gland, in your brain, as well as tendons. There's all sorts of areas of the bodies that this fluoride affects. And this kind of fluoride that's put into the water is actually called hydrofluorosilicic acid, and it's a byproduct of the phosphate and aluminum industries, which we'll get into later as well. So what happens is this waste product from these industries, which by the way is mostly based in Florida, take these wastes essentially, and they sell it to communities. So if your community is fluoridating its water supply, it's buying this waste product, which essentially would be waste. They're buying it and then putting it into the water supply. And we're going to get into the process of how this is added to the water supply, and the whole process, the whole 9 yards. Actually, Peter Van Caulart, I'm going to play the interview that I have very shortly. He is the director for the Environmental Agency Training Institute, the Environmental Training Institute. So he trains people in Canada here on how to treat water, as well as other environmental processes, mostly in regards to the industry. So he's definitely the trainer for that, in Canada for that. As well as he is the vice president of the Canadians Opposed To Fluoridation organization, known as COF-COF, COF-COF.ca, which is a great organization dedicated to ceasing fluoridation. The interview that I did with him is very good. He was very educated, and he taught me a lot of things about the issue. And the interview that I'm going to play for you guys today has been edited a little bit. The only thing I edited out was, just me asking him questions, some of them, and stuff like that, just so it's more fluent information. I didn't take any chunks out or anything that he said out of the interview, but I'm going to play that on this show. Now, the interview is also in the documentary that I'm working on, which is going to be called Fluoridation, Cease and Desist. That's essentially means to remove it and make it law to keep it out. That's basically what that title says. And the interview is heavily edited in the documentary, so I wanted to show you guys pretty much the unedited version. I threw a couple news clips into this interview as well, but it's essentially the raw interview with Peter. So that'll provide a ton of information for you guys on the issue. So now that you guys understand the two processes of fluoridation, I think we should talk about the history of fluoridation as well. I'm going to get the Google up on the screen here so that you guys can see. Now, water fluoridation started on January 25th, 1945 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was actually done as a test. They wanted to see if it would prevent cavities, really, because prior to 1945, prior to the first water fluoridation, what happened was there was a researcher who discovered that in around certain mining communities, there were people that had some sort of symptom on their teeth. Their teeth were brown and very hard, and there was chunks taken out of it, chipped teeth. Some of them were white patches, but with severe exposure, it was actually turning brown. And they termed this symptom or these anomalies Colorado brown stain. So that was the original name for fluorosis, because after they eventually discovered that it was actually fluorosis that was causing these symptoms on these teeth. And that was caused, they later found after research, by overexposure to fluoride. Now, fluoride is naturally occurring. It does occur. It does show up in water. It shows up in our body. There is natural occurring fluoride, but there's all sorts of different fluoride compounds out there. So the person who figured out about the Colorado brown stain, the person that discovered that essentially was Frederick Mackay, and he did that around the turn of the century, 1901. He studied it till about 1930s, as well with another associate, I guess you could say. His name was Green Vardaman Black. Now, I'm going to get Google up here, as I said I was going to do, because I want to show you guys. I mean, they're very proud of water fluoridation. Water fluoridation, 1945. And here we go. There's a big plaque for this in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And here's the image. I'm going to get it on the screen here. And the plaque says, on January 25th, 1945, Grand Rapids became the first city in the world to add fluoride to its public water supply. The city, along with the U.S. Public Health Service, the Michigan Department of Health, and the University of Michigan School of Dentistry, began a 10-year study to determine the effectiveness of fluoride in the prevention of tooth decay. The city was chosen as a test site because of its large population of school-age children. There's something to point out. Right on the plaque, right in the Michigan, they're saying this. Its closeness to Lake Michigan, which is mostly free of natural fluoride, and its proximity to Muskegon, which served as the control city. So they did the test between two cities. One had fluoridation levels, the other one didn't. By 1955, the study had shown a 65% reduction in tooth decay and led to the adoption of fluoridation as an accepted public health measure. Now, that's what they say. That's the official claim about water fluoridation. So, few things that need to be pointed out here and addressed right away. First off, on that plaque, they're targeting children with the fluoridation experiments. The experiment lasted 10 years, and it was never approved by the FDA, by anybody. It was never approved. It was an experiment, a controlled experiment to see. Now, as we'll find out later, a lot of the science behind fluoride is fraudulent. Fraudulent science, faked so that we'd believe that it's good for us. Now, why would they want to do that? Pretty much as soon as fluoridation was introduced into the water supply, there was debate over that. There was people protesting it, mostly biochemists, people who understand the body and stuff like that. They had significant questions and concern over the ingestion of fluoride particles, and they had every right to do so and to question the whole process of water fluoridation, because it really doesn't make sense. They say it's to prevent cavities, but there's other ways to do that. Brush your teeth. You don't even need toothpaste with fluoride to brush your teeth. You don't. Now, what a lot of these protesters over is that fluoride was, sodium fluoride was also found in rat poison and insecticides. Now, it's still found in those products. And when you add something like that into the water supply, people are obviously going to protest and question, why are you putting poison in our drinking water supply? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's absurd. It truly is. I want to show you guys a debate. I believe this is from the 60s. And it was on the CBC. It was an open debate that I found, and it's pretty old. I couldn't save the video, but I will get it on the screen here for you guys. And this was pretty much right after it got introduced into Canada. Now it's also interesting to point out that hold on, I'm going to try to mute this ad here. It froze up. Well, before I freeze the computer up totally, I'm just going to wait here for a minute and let it do its thing. Let it breathe, I guess. Alright. So I guess it has to play these ads. So I'm going to talk over the ad here. Try to drown this out.
We know this because
but this debate was held, I believe it was in the 60s that this debate was held. And water fluoridation in Canada started in 1945, in June 20th, 1945.
Jason liked you the way you liked him.
And this is a Canadian debate on CBC.
You didn't know if you'd be a good parent. And you don't know if you or someone you love has the early signs of cancer. But that you can find out. If you're 50 or over, talk to your healthcare provider about getting screened for breast, cervical, or colorectal cancer.
I'll pause it there now that it's set. Alright. So, as I was explaining before, water fluoridation in Canada began in the city of Brantford, Ontario in 1945. It was June 20th, 1945 when they first introduced water fluoridation in Canada. And I'm going to get to this later on, the connections between the people who introduced fluoride into the water supplies in the United States and in Canada. Now, before I get to this video here and the debate, there's a lot of people out there that think that fluoridation started in the Nazi concentration camps or even in the Russian gulags in Siberia. But that's not true. At least the extensive research I've done, I can find no evidence, no documents, no substantial, credible evidence to support this claim. Now, this claim that fluoridation was first used in the Nazi concentration camps, it surfaced when an author, I have it written down here somewhere, I'm going to look for it, just so I can give you guys that information to check it out. Where is it? Oh, it's probably here. Yeah, okay, so the book was called The Crimes and Punishment of IG Farben. And IG Farben was a German chemical company definitely well known, very powerful chemical company of the day, responsible for making chemical gases for the chemical warfare, as well as they have a long history, as well as ties to Americans as well, financially and all that stuff. There's massive connections there with the New World Order plot and all that stuff. But the book was by an author named Joseph Borkin, and in the book he claims that that's when the first instances of fluoridation were used, but the Nazis kept pretty good records of what they did, and there's no records that could be found of this, as well as for the Russian gulags, there's no records that could be found proving that fluoride was used indefinitely. Now, I do believe that it was experimented with, but not really discussed there, and later implemented based upon the research that was done there. I do believe that that research was transferred over to America and Canada, likely through Project Paperclip, which was the CIA operation, which got a lot of Nazis off of their crimes, off their war crimes, and brought them over so that they could continue their studies in North America. And a lot of them received new names, new identifications to do this so that they could work under the radar. And Werner von Braun's rocket program was one of them. There's all sorts of MK Ultra. There's all these fields of sciences that were expanded upon it and further investigated using Nazi scientists and on the money of the American government and the Canadian government, because there was even some Nazis working here in Canada at the time. So that's the only source, that's the source that everybody quotes, is Joseph Borkin's book saying that the Nazis, it was developed there. But again, there's no evidence to support that I've been able to find. I mean, I dug pretty deep and I couldn't find it. So if anybody out there has any credible, credible, you can't prove it wrong evidence, I'd like to see it. Get in touch with me, send me that evidence, because if there can be a connection made, a definitive connection, then that would definitely put a lot of things into perspective there. But I think it definitely needs some more research, especially with IG Farben and stuff like that. It definitely needs to be looked into a bit further. But without further ado, I'm going to get to this debate here. They don't start talking about fluoridation until a bit later.
Dr. Dunn.
This doctor here.
For you do. Have a good many number of goiters about, which we don't have now.
Is sodium fluoride in water any more dangerous?
There we go.
It is an ingredient.
We want to recreate this story, both sides of this.
Okay, it seems that the volume's low, so I'm going to get that up for you guys. And here's the debate.
Very controversial subject.
And keep in mind, science at the time wasn't as developed as it is now. We know a lot more about it now.
Is it true or false that sodium fluoride is a basic ingredient in rat poison?
I think it's fair to say that sodium fluoride is contained in a rat poison, and I think it's also fair to say that it's contained in tea. What comparison you wish to draw from that statement will be up to you to draw it. It is an ingredient of rat poison.
Dr. Dunn, isn't it also a fact that iodine is used in salt?
I would like to make that point if we didn't have it in the salt. If we didn't have a statutory requirement to have it in salt, we'd have a good many number of goiters about, which we don't have now.
Is sodium fluoride in water any more dangerous than iodine in salt, Dr. Dunn?
We believe that sodium fluoride in water in the proper proportions is in no way dangerous or harmful to health.
Why then are you determined to force this on the people without a vote?
I don't think I am prepared to force anything on people because I have no legislative authority to do anything. I will attempt to persuade people that it is a desirable thing, and perhaps we could draw an analogy here to an educational system. I live in Etobicoke where you do. My older boy goes to school. I really believe it's beyond my competence to vote on any type of curriculum of study or any type of pedagogical approach to his learning, because I think people of greater training should perhaps make
so that the citizens aren't intelligent enough to decide for themselves whether they want a rat poison shoveled into their drinking water.
Dr. Dunn, Mr. Sinclair and I have been on opposite sides of this question for a long time.
Yes, I observed that.
He has broadcasted continually against it, and I have written in favor of it in my column, The Telegram. Now, I suggest to you, Dr. Dunn, I would like to ask you, rather, isn't it a fact that every reputable medical and dental organization in North America favors fluoridation of water?
That's a loaded question. Why don't you ask him?
I am asking. I am asking. Isn't it a fact? Isn't that a fact, Doctor, that every medical and dental association in North America is in favor of fluoridation of water?
That is a fact, and I think you might also
I
add the
challenge it
World,
as a fact.
the
I say
World
it is
Health
not a fact.
Organization itself.
And isn't it a fact that the Provincial Health Department of Ontario has endorsed fluoridation?
As well as the Minister.
And
of
isn't
the
it also
Department
a
of National
fact
Health
that
and Welfare.
isn't it also a fact that in every
So notice how the doctor admitted that there's rat poison in the fluoride, and he's saying it's good for you, and it's a doctor on TV saying that.
7 years old. How old are you?
I'm 33.
I've got all my teeth. How many have you got?
I have them all except third molars, which just
All
weren't
except
positioned.
Well, I haven't all of mine. Mine were knocked out in a car crash long ago.
But I don't know what that is proving.
No, it doesn't prove anything.
It proves that I was brought up by cleaning my teeth and not by taking rat poison in my water, so I've got my teeth.
The fact remains that 98% of our population suffers adversely from dental ill effects, and it seems to me only reasonable to try and do something to prevent this horrible increase in
Why don't you
tooth
advise
decay.
that they clean their teeth?
Well, we've done that until our heads are flat, hitting them against brick walls.
Dr. Dunn.
A voice in the wilderness, Tim.
You're very brave.
I'd just like to ask this question. Are there any proven cases where fluoridation has had an injurious effect on the health of people?
There are certain individuals who attempt to make certain claims which have never been supported by any reputable scientific organization on this country.
Doctor, I'm sorry. Would you finish what you have to say? I was thinking of the
I was
time.
just going to make the point that an organization such as the Canadian Medical Association and Canadian Dental and American Medical Association are not going to endorse a procedure which is not only going to harm the public, but harm ourselves, who after all live and bring up our families in these communities as well.
And isn't it a fact also, Doctor, that the dentists will actually be harming their own profession in the sense that they won't be making as much money if if all our children have sound teeth.
I think a basic premise of any health profession, physician or a dentist, is that he attempts to eliminate the need for his services.
Exactly.
I don't like to sound trite, but that is the principle under which we operate.
The dentists have nothing to
You
lose.
want to force it on people against their wishes. For instance, the Christian Scientists.
You're saying
The
that, I'm
specific-
not. What
Yes,
about
I'm saying
iodine
it.
and salt? Isn't that the same analogy?
I don't know. I'm objecting to being compelled to take medication.
You object to take table salt?
No.
How
You
about
have to. You
how
have
about
to take it with
how
iodine.
about chloride in the water, in the drinking
And
water?
Gordon, do you object
Two
to,
wrongs don't make
to
a right.
vaccination? Do you object to having your children and grandchildren vaccinated?
Against my wishes, yes. I wouldn't object in that case, but I do object to this rat poison being shoveled into my water.
Your children have to be vaccinated in certain circumstances. So do mine. And I think that's quite right because it's for the protection of the community. The reason you drink chlorine in your water is because you know it's necessary, and chlorine is a deadly poison, isn't it?
No.
Yes, of course it's a deadly
gentlemen.
poison. The basis for poison gas.
Before Mr. Tom Payne and Mr. Sinkler square off, I think we should thank our guests for being such a good sport and coming to our program, and thank you for taking time out from your busy schedule, Dr.
So there we have it. That was a historic Canadian debate about fluoridation in the water. And as you seen, the doctor on there was naming all those alphabet agencies, the World Health Organization, Canadian Dental Association, you name it. Obviously, they're going to name these places as saying that it's good because they're the ones who are promoting it. They're the ones who are profiting it from it as well, from the aluminum industry and all that other stuff. As well as the deeper rooting reason on why they're fluoridating the water, which we'll get to in a little bit there. So I know that some of you are trying to avoid drinking fluoridated water. If you're living in a city that doesn't have fluoride in the water, kudos. If you have fluoridation happening in your community, I would definitely suggest trying to get it removed because the evidence that I'm going to show you a bit later is going to definitely scare the pants off you, and you're not going to want to take fluoride anymore. But Here's bottled water. You could check on the labels of bottled water to see if there's fluoride. It'll say fluoride right on it, fluoride ions, and it'll say how many parts per million. Now this Real Canadian Natural Spring says 0 ppm, which means that it has 0 fluoride in it. However, it's in a plastic bottle. The plastic chemicals are leaching into the water. Now a lot of people are buy bottled water to avoid fluoridation, but they don't realize that they're getting all sorts of other chemicals just because of the plastic bottle that they're drinking it in. So that's one thing to point out. The best place to get water is natural spring water, natural water. That's the best way to do it. Or there's ways that you can remove fluoride from your drinking water, such as reverse osmosis. There's also distillers that you can get. I would definitely recommend ordering a distiller or trying to find one and distilling the chemicals out of the water. That's probably the best way to do it. But when they first started putting fluoride into toothpaste and stuff like that, here's a brand new box of Crest here. You might remember this was even just a year or two ago, and I'm guessing that some of you may be able to go to your bathroom right now and look for a tube of toothpaste and find that obviously it says that it has fluoride on it or some sort of fluoride compound. This one here says dentifrice with fluorostat. Fluorostat is a fancy name for the fluoride that's in it. There's all different kinds of types that they put into the toothpaste, but essentially it's sodium fluoride, which it says right on here, sodium fluoride 0.243%, and that's what it says right on the back of this package. Now, this package here has the Canadian Dental Association seal of approval on it. It says Crest contains sodium fluoride, which is, in our opinion, an effective decay preventive agent and is of significant value when used in a conscientiously applied program of oral hygiene and regular professional care. So, of course, you've got the symbolism on there of the Dental Association, and there's the medicinal ingredients and non-medicinal ingredients. Now, here's the thing. It says right on here, do not swallow. Children under 6 years of age should use only a pea-sized amount and be supervised while brushing. Now that's the warning on this label. That's the only warning on the box. When you take the tube out, it says the exact same thing. Do not swallow. Children under 6 years of age should use only a pea-sized amount and be supervised while brushing. Now, that's the only warning you got on here. But if you remember the older toothpaste, and some of you may even have toothpaste in your bathroom right now that has the warning on it, if you swallow more than the recommended amount, to contact poison control immediately. Now that warning used to be standard on every single tube of toothpaste, on everyone. But now they took the labels off. Now you're not seeing that label on there. Now it just says do not swallow. And then it says to use a pea-sized amount for children. That's what it says. So they took the label off. They still label it as containing sodium fluoride. However, they don't list it as a poison on the box anymore. Even though it is a poison, you can look it up, check it out, it's a poison. But they're not putting it onto the box anymore. Why? Probably to avoid legal issues and probably to avoid scaring people, because people are getting smarter nowadays and they don't want people looking at what they're going to put in their mouth and say if you swallow it, to contact poison control immediately. I mean, that's absurd. And another thing too is they say to put a pea-sized amount on your toothbrush. A pea-sized amount. Now that word there, a pea-sized. The pineal gland, they say, is like a pea-sized gland in your brain, and that's one part of the body that fluoride is attracted to and it's drawn to, more so than even bones and teeth. So there's been studies that have proven that. So if that's what's going on, you've got this pea-sized gland in your brain that's we'll look into a little bit later, and it's being calcified, and the fluoride is absorbing into that. They're saying to use a pea-sized amount, and then you've got the term pea-brain. Well, pea-brain means you're not too smart. You don't have a high IQ. So the pea-sized amount, pea brain. I mean, what's going on here, They designed our language. The French Masons designed our language. They've designed a lot of these systems and also a lot of the science programs and stuff like that. So I think that they're related, those terms, definitely. So why they're not putting the poison warning on the toothpaste anymore is definitely something worth looking into. But definitely you shouldn't be swallowing toothpaste. I mean, since you were a kid, you were probably told that. But a doctor's recommendations, or a dentist, if you go to the dentist and ask the dentist when to start brushing your child's teeth with fluoride, they're going to tell you around 2 years old to start brushing your child's teeth. Now, if you've ever tried to go get toothpaste for your children, any parents out there, you're going to notice that a lot of the toothpaste out there is flavored. Tastes like bubblegum, tastes like fruit, tastes like juice or something like that. And that right there, also, it's very, very, very hard to find children's toothpaste without fluoride in it. You can get fluoride-free toothpaste or make your own toothpaste, which I would definitely recommend. However, you're not going to find too many children's toothpaste without fluoride, and they flavor the toothpaste so that the children will swallow the fluoride. That's why they're flavoring the toothpaste. They say it's so that the children don't. They say that so it doesn't taste bad or burn their mouth like the mint toothpaste does and stuff like that, which has a slight truth to it. There is truth to that. However, you don't flavor your toothpaste like bubblegum while there's poison in it and give it to a child, because 9 times out of 10 that child is going to swallow that toothpaste and they're going to start getting health problems. Now, they also there was warnings out there too for mothers out there to not use fluoridated water in their baby's formula, because when you're feeding your child using breast milk, they're not getting very much fluoride in their body. They're not getting the intake of fluoride. It's very, very, very low, and this fluoride is natural occurring. But when you're using formula for your babies, there's already fluoride in the formula, and when you're mixing it with tap water, you're putting fluoride in there. Even if you're using bottled water, sometimes there's fluoride in it. There's got to be a reason why they're pumping all this fluoride in there. They say it's for your teeth, but, I mean, look what overexposure of fluoride does. It gives you fluorosis. So, and skeletal fluorosis as well. So, there's all this stuff going on that just doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Why are we putting poison in our mouth? What are the health risks associated with that? Well, there's tons. There's lots and lots of health risks associated with that. But I wanted to mention a couple of the founding fathers, I guess you could say, of fluoridation before I get to the interview with Peter Van Caulart. Now, as I mentioned, Frederick Mackay and Green Vardaman Black were essentially the ones who discovered fluorosis around the mining communities. They're like, what's causing this? They realized overfluoridation was causing it. So then other scientists got involved in the investigation, in the research, and they tried to control the fluoridation intakes so that it would strengthen the teeth instead of overexposure, essentially figuring out a science out of it and administering it in controlled doses. Now, the problem is with water fluoridation is there is no way to control how much fluoride intake you're getting. There is no way. You can't control how much is going into the water. You can dump it in. You can control how much you're dumping in, but the dispersion rates are definitely not controlled. So that's the problem there. But another curious figure in the early fluoridation history, there's a few of them, but a very notorious person and essentially the pioneering investigator for water fluoridation. His name was Henry Trondley Dean, or H.T. Dean. Now, these guys here that I'm going to be talking about, very hard to find information about them. Henry Dean, you could find some information about him. It's not so hard to find, but there's a couple other shady characters in this whole thing where it's very hard to find. Considering their role in all of this, it seems like a lot of their records have been taken down. You can't find many pictures of them. They're listed on websites as doing what they've done, pioneering stuff. However, other than that, it's pretty lucrative what you're going to find. Slim pickings at best. So I dug and dug and dug to find this information for you guys. But Henry Tronley Dean was essentially the one who was in control of the water fluoridation test in 1945 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He worked with other researchers in developing this and trying to figure out if it did have an effect on the population. Now, he was involved in the United States Army during World War I. Until 1919, he returned to America and he started private dentistry. He wanted to essentially start his own business, make money doing private dentistry. However, in 1921, he entered the United States Public Health Service and worked with U.S. Marine hospitals until he was placed in charge of dental research at the National Institute of Health. And in 1945, he became the director of the National Institute of Health. Not too much information about all this stuff. You could find it on some articles and stuff like that. But following World War II, he directed epidemiologic studies for the German army. So there's something right there, Following World War II, or actually right at the end of it, they're working for the German army. Okay. There we go. When the National Institute for Dental Research was established in 1948, he became the director, which he held until he retired in 1953. There's all sorts of things that this guy was involved with as well. Other things which I'll explain in my documentary once I have all the research finished and finalized. But it's very, very curious, these guys. A lot of these people that did start putting water fluoridation into the water were associated with military backgrounds, as we'll find out very shortly. Now, the person who was responsible for putting fluoride in the water in Canada, he's a shady character as well. I could only find one picture of him, and it's a picture of him with his wife. I'm gonna bring that up here for you guys. I'm gonna have to hurry up with this because definitely want to show you guys that complete interview and a couple other videos if I got the time here. But the person who was responsible for putting fluoride in the water in Brampton, Ontario, his name was Dr. Hutton, Dr. William Lorne Hutton. And I'm going to get his image up here because he's a shady character big time. And this could be the connection that links it to the Nazi Party. So, this is it right here. Look, William Lorne Hutton. You see what I got here as a result? Nothing. I mean, there's some pictures. These guys are probably named William Lorne Hutton. But, I mean, which one's the right guy, right? It's hard to find a picture of him. It really is. And where is the one that I'm looking for? There's only one picture of him. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. This guy here does not want people to know what he did. And they're hiding this guy. They're definitely covering up his identity. They're not showing you who William Lorne Hutton is. I might have to put in doctor here. And I checked up military records and all that. This guy was legitimate. He was definitely in the army. Served in World War I till he was injured. Well, I don't know why it's not showing up here, folks. I'm actually probably going to have to pull it up on my computer files. I thought I could find it right online here. But, actually here. Brantford. I mean, that's how shady this is, right? The guy who pioneered water fluoridation in Canada, and as well, William Hutton became the head medical officer in Brampton in 1937. So that's another big one right there. And he was also regarded as the pioneer of diphtheria control. So he's the pioneer of diphtheria control, the pioneer of water fluoridation in Canada, and we're not finding his picture here or anything like that. So I'm going to check the web here. This is probably a faster way. All right, here we go. Now there's articles on this guy, but the image is not showing up here. So, sorry folks, I'm going to have to pull this up in a different means. Here it is. All right. So there is Dr. William Lorne Hutton, the gentleman I speak of. And this guy here is a shady character. This is the only picture I could find of him and his wife, considering the scope of this guy. Now, what's very interesting to point out is during the time that he was putting this water, the fluoride in the water, and he was advocating for this, he wasn't part of the Brantford Fluoride Committee, but he was the one who essentially had the power to put it in there, and he appointed a committee, etc., etc. Now, not only did he become the head medical officer in Brampton, but he was also, here's the key, the president of the Eugenics Society of Canada between 1930 and 1938. So just prior to the fluoridation process in Brantford in Ontario, in Canada, he was the president of the Eugenics Society in Canada. Now, in my documentary, I explain a bit more about this guy, and I also show some of his statements because he went to hearings for these groups, and he said some pretty repulsing things, especially about... I don't want to get into details. You'll have to watch in the documentary, but he definitely said some crazy things that definitely were pretty disgusting, you know what I mean? And this guy was a World War I veteran who worked in the medical industry, or in the medical division, sorry. And this right here, I believe, is information on, yeah, right here. I'll get this up for you guys. But here, he was attached to the Royal Canadian Regiment as a medical officer, and departed from Halifax to Bermuda in 1914, then to England 1915, then to France 1915, 4-month service in the field with the RCR. That's his military history. He's also listed in the Canadian Who's Who, which definitely has a bit of notoriety there, but as you've seen, very hard to find images of this guy or anything like that. Even data on this guy, information on this guy is pretty hard to find. But it says, it sums up right here that he pioneered in public application of toxoid as a diphtheria preventative. Brantford has been free of diphtheria cases or deaths since November 18th, 1930, which constitutes a Canadian record for cities of 30,000 population and over. Canadian pioneer in application of fluorine for public water supply and the control of dental caries. June 20th, 1945, Brantford embarked on 10-year experiment, adding 1 part fluorine to million parts public water supply. Served in World War 1914 to 1918. He's also known as, obviously, Major William L. Hutton. His obituary, Dr. L. Hutton, 70, died in hospital on July 30th. A native of Winnipeg, he studied medicine at the University of Toronto and graduated in 1911. In the First World War, he served overseas as medical officer in the Royal Canadian Regiment. After the war, he moved to Brantford, Ontario, where as medical officer of health, he won international recognition as a pioneer of diphtheria control and water fluoridation. Now, despite his pioneering efforts, there's not a lot of information about the guy, and that's usually a sign that they don't want you knowing about him. They don't want you looking him up. So he's definitely a shady character there, especially with his eugenics connections and some of the policies he was discussing and his beliefs on the whole thing. Definitely some disturbing stuff there. I gotta say. So you've got that, and then you've also got another character who is heavily involved in the fluoridation agenda, and that would be Dr. Harold Hodge, who worked for the who studied at the Rochester Institute. He was very vocal about putting fluoride in the water, and there's actually a clip of him as well explaining how it's safe. Now, he was very adamant about saying that it was safe. He went on record saying it was safe and there was nothing wrong with adding fluoride to the water, and this was done because of all the protests because of the rat poison connection that was made by people, and they started protesting it. They didn't want to be fluoridated, especially without their consent. Now, in 1945, when they first put fluoride in the drinking water supply, it wasn't mandated, you know what I mean? They had no legal right to do so, especially against people's consent. I mean, if you're going to poison somebody, you need their consent. And you shouldn't even be poisoning them in the first place. I mean, that sounds ridiculous on its own. You should have their consent to give somebody poison. Come on. You know what I mean? That's insanity. That's the insanity that exists in the world today. And that's why people are so adamant about protesting against this issue. Now, Dr. Harold Hodge, who I was discussing earlier, also went on to be one of the main guys in the Manhattan Project. And for those of you who need a reminder on what the Manhattan Project is, that was the organization appointed by the Atomic Energy Commission to do the atomic bomb tests, to develop the atomic bomb. And high amounts of fluoride, as well as other chemicals, were needed to produce these bombs. And, I mean, Harold Hodge was involved in that. Not only that, but Harold Hodge was also involved with the Oak Ridge experiments, where they were injecting, it wasn't only in Oak Ridge, but there was also other facilities that he was involved with, but injecting plutonium and uranium into people without their consent, first off, and second off, to see what the results would be under exposure to these toxic radioactive elements. Injecting with plutonium and uranium. Those are some serious toxic elements being injected into people's bodies. And Harold Hodge was the one who foreseen that whole program. So, atomic bomb, injections without consent, fluoridation. Connect the dots, people. I mean, what was this guy really doing? You know, what was this guy's agenda? Was he must have been linked with other people that had the same agenda, the same game plan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have got it. And Truman at the time was signing all these new agencies, you know, saying, okaying all this federal funding. All these organizations started popping up, like the dental associations, the Atomic Energy Commissions. All these things were just signed over right after World War II. All these new agencies started up. Alphabet soup. That's what happened there. Total alphabet soup. So, Harold Hodge is another shady individual in the whole fluoride thing, as well as Gerald Judy Cox. Gerald J. Cox, he's known as. He was involved with the Mellon Institute, and he was definitely very vocal for adding fluoride into the water as well. Now, he's a shady character in the whole ordeal as well. He was basically saying that, you know, let's get this going. People should be fluoridated. For all the people that are protesting it, or when fluoridated is removed, we need to reverse this. Gerald Cox is saying that, you know, we need to reverse it. We need fluoride. Pump it in there. Now, absurd. Purely absurd. Now, I know I didn't discuss all the total details about fluoridation yet, because a lot of the information is presented in the interview with Peter Van Caulart, and I know a lot of you guys are already educated on fluoride to some degree. I mean, by now you have to understand that fluoride is a toxic element. It shouldn't be ingested in the body. We shouldn't be taking poison. And that's the reason why people are protesting it, because they're getting drugged and medicated without their consent. Because Prozac is also very, very, I think it's like 90% fluoride. So a lot of these pharmaceutical drugs as well are high percentages of fluoride. And it's been proven as in a Harvard study that fluoride intake reduces your IQ. It definitely dumbs down people, makes them more docile, makes them sleepy and tired and just unmotivated. That's one of the reasons why they're fluoridating us in our water supply, so that we won't act up, so that we won't protest, so that we're not too smart. We'll just do our jobs, be a slave, not ask any questions, and just be happy with this control grid that they got us in. And if there isn't fluoride in the drinking water, then there's definitely fluoride in the food you're eating, because a lot of the factories that are making this food use fluoridated public water to mix in, because the amount of water they need to make these foods is so great that they have no other way to get filtered distilled water. Now, there is a lot of good companies out there that are using distilled water, but a lot of times it just says water on the package. Water, water, water. You could look it up. Some of them say distilled water on there, which is good. If they're using distilled water, they're spending a little bit of money, or they have the distillers to do so right on site. But all too often, and a majority of these companies just want to make money, they're using fluoridated water to make their food. So you're getting fluoride in that. Teas are very high concentrates with fluoride. White wine is definitely known to have high concentrations of fluoride in it. There's all sorts of foods and beverages out there, beers, alcoholic beverages and stuff like that. They have high amounts of fluoride in them because of that. So you could avoid it by not drinking the tap water or trying to buy bottled water that doesn't have fluoride in it. But a lot of the foods, unfortunately, also have fluoride in it. A lot of vegetables, too. They don't tell you, they don't put labels on the vegetables saying, yeah, this was grown with distilled water. No, they don't tell you that. And it's pretty sad that that's a reality we live in, where we don't even know what's in our food. So that's pretty disturbing implications there for sure. But yeah, I guess I'm gonna get the interview going with Peter Van Caulart. He definitely fills in a lot of the dots that I forgot to mention. And at the end, I think we'll have a little bit of time. I could play a couple more videos that I really want to show you guys. So I'm gonna get that going here. Before it's too late, because this interview is very good, and I can't wait to get that documentary done. I've been working really hard all week on that, trying my hardest to get at least a little portion of it to show you guys in the show today. But then I figured I would spoil it. So what I'm going to do is show you the unedited interview with Peter Van Caulart. And what I mean by unedited is it's not placed in the documentary. So this is like the solid chunk interview. There's a couple little news clips in there and a couple other things that I added in there just to add a bit of flavor. But other than that, it's just straight up facts with one of Canada's leading experts on water fluoridation, Peter Van Caulart. So without further ado, here's that interview.
My name is Peter Van Caulart. I'm the director of the Environmental Training Institute and the vice president of the Canadians Opposed To Fluoridation organization situated in Canada.
How long have you been doing what you do?
Well, I've been training water and wastewater operators in the environmental sciences for approximately 33 years. And the fluoridation issue for me came to light 10 years ago when one of my students said to me that I was really washed up with regard to the current information about fluoridation. I said to him, tell me what your evidence is, show me what your evidence is, and I'm willing to listen. He produced 4 videotapes for me, and when he produced the 4 videotapes, what happened was that I went back to my hotel room and stayed up that night before the next class the following day. And I came back in and I completely changed my opinion about fluoridation. And from that point on, in 2004, I've been fighting to get fluoridation ceased in the country and in my municipality and other municipalities in the province of Ontario. And I won't stop until I finish doing it for the entire country of Canada.
Next up, we have Peter Van Caulart. I hope I've said that correctly. From the Environmental Training Institute. Sir, are you in the audience? Come on down if you would. Give us your name, and we don't have your address on file that I can see, so would you state that as well, please, sir? And you will have about 8 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Mayor, Council, Committee. My name is Peter Van Caulart. I'm the director of the Environmental Training Institute. I've been training water and wastewater operators in Ontario for 3 decades. I'm responsible for not only the training, but their certification, licensing, etc. And I have trained many operators, some of whom are in this room, which I was delighted to see. I've also been in service to the city of Brantford. The water staff and the wastewater treatment staff are my students, and I have to compliment you at this venture that you have some of the brightest and best people I know of in the business, and take an accolade for that, because they truly do outstanding work.
Can you give maybe a list of cities that you have been successful in assisting with removal?
Me personally, or
yeah,
my involvement as a group of people with a group of people has been in earnest since about 2007. So the first city that I was involved with was my own municipality of the region of Niagara. And to their credit, the region of Niagara was the first municipality who went against the advice of the medical officer of health based on the presentations made by 5 individuals who were very well informed. I was one of those individuals, and there were others, and the others made wonderful presentations to the council, and the council asked questions. And this was the first time that we had seen a council in a more conciliatory mode, a more caring mode. And before we went into that council meeting, I heard councillors discuss amongst themselves, it was a foregone conclusion, that fluoridation will in fact be started up, and it'd be a de facto issue for Niagara. And it was very shocking to those people who have those preconceived ideas to find out the information they did in a 6.5-hour meeting. That meeting resulted in a completely different vote, and the impetus for the rest of the successes that have occurred in Canada since that time. Successes like Quebec City, Waterloo, Dryden, Ontario, Calgary, Kingston, a little village called Dutton Dunwich, or a little municipality called Dutton Dunwich in southwestern Ontario, between Chatham and London. There have been numerous cases of cities in other parts of Canada, smaller municipalities and hamlets. Recently, Cobalt, Kirkland Lake, 5 or 6 communities in Quebec. The names are small little towns. They escape me as I think about them. And many small little hamlets and villages in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. Now, when we take a look at, and of course Moncton, New Brunswick, the greater Moncton area as well. So when we take a look at the cessation rates across the country, what we're seeing is the high that was reported by Health Canada in 2005 was 45.1% of the Canadian population was drinking fluoridated water. And the reality in 2013, as I sit here and speak to you, is that it's now down 28%, down to 32.5% of Canadians are drinking fluoridated water. And if we look at the actual population numbers, we're talking about 10.1 million people, largely in 4 or 5 major cities in the country, and predominantly in the Greater Toronto area. So the area that's bound from Hamilton through Halton and Peel regions, that's the cities of Burlington, Oakville, Mississauga, Toronto itself, and on the other side we're talking about the cities of Oshawa and Pickering in the region of Durham, and to the north the city of Vaughan, all of York region, and that pretty much encompasses about 6.5-7 million people of the 10.1 in Canada. So the rest of the people that are drinking fluoridated water are predominantly in the cities of Winnipeg, Ottawa, London, Halifax, Edmonton, but not cities like Calgary, Montreal, Vancouver. These cities are progressive, and they have either never had fluoridation or they have ceased. And I should mention, when it just comes to mind of communities that have ceased, recently in January I was involved with a presentation at the Windsor City Council, and Windsor City Council ceased fluoridation as well. So the city of Windsor. I'm currently involved in the campaign to get the ball rolling for the cessation of fluoridation in the city of Sudbury. And that's a very progressive city, and I think great headway can be made in that city to get fluoridation stopped there.
Let's go to a definition of what water fluoridation is. And when you take a look at this, it's very simple. There are many definitions for it. This is probably the most simple and most distilled. The substance at the time in 1945 was sodium fluoride. It's an ionic compound, and all that means is that it separates very easily in water when it's dissolved in water. We have considerations that we're looking at now with regard to fluoridation. We're not using the simple compound sodium fluoride. In fact, very few places are using it these days. We're using something called fluorosilicates. And I'm concerned about the contaminants that come across with the fluorosilicate usage. I'm also concerned with the lead that leaches into the water as a result of the action of fluoride in the water distribution system. Additionally, we have found that the original source data has been flawed, was flawed from the beginning, which means the decision to do so, to fluoridate, was also based in a flawed piece of science. And more importantly, it's been proven invalid.
It's very important then to be addressing this issue because essentially the media, the mainstream science community, etc., are kind of ignoring the problem. Do you feel that a lot of what we know about fluoride today is based off of older theories on the subject?
Oh, absolutely. The original evidence that was produced to show effectiveness at preventing dental decay through the use of ingesting fluoride compounds was seriously flawed. And Dr. Sutton, Philip Sutton, was a pioneer in deconstructing the statistics of the day back in the late 50s and the early 60s to prove the statistical flaws in the methodology that was used, so that the conclusions that were drawn at that time were not relevant to the purported claims. In the 1970s, Rudolf Ziegelbecker from Europe was the man who did a huge amount of work. He was a brilliant researcher, and what he did was to show mathematically how it was impossible for the claims of dental decay prevention to be offset by the increased rates of fluorosis in society. In other words, he found two things. He found that the claims of dental decay prevention couldn't be proven, and he also found that the effects of too much fluoride ingestion, fluorosis, were exacerbated in the countries that were actively fluoridating their community water systems at the time. I must comment that Dr. Zeigelbecker did pioneering work, and before his death, he was a very effectual man at getting many of the European countries to abandon or ban water fluoridation as a public health practice.
This document here, or this study here, was produced by Dr. Zeigelbecker in Europe, and he was the prominent individual who went around through Europe and said, look, we've gone back to the original studies and we've done a trace, and we traced all of the levels of caries to the levels of fluoride in the water, and we don't see a correlation.
The largest fluoridated population on the planet is the United States. And the United States is also the biggest promoter through exporting their expertise at the CDC and their big associations, medical dental associations, exporting that knowledge to the rest of the world. And largely, other countries in the rest of the world either are not interested in fluoridation or have tried it and found it to be false and have abandoned it. The next largest country by percentage is likely Australia. Australia has a fairly robust fluoridation program, although just in the past half year or so, the law has changed to allow municipalities to opt out of fluoridation should the will of the people indicate that they want to do that. And my last understanding is that many municipalities have dropped the fluoridation of the public water supplies under the flexibility of the new law. Smaller countries like Ireland, that is the Republic of Ireland, have mandated mandatory fluoridation. So that entire population, if it's drinking water from a public water supply, are drinking fluoridated water. And it's interesting to note at this point in time that another brilliant person, Declan Waugh, has produced a thick volume, well over a couple of hundred pages, of the incidences of chronic diseases, comparing Southern Ireland, Northern Ireland, which is not fluoridated, and he has found overwhelming evidence that in at least 20 different chronic diseases that people face, that the rates in Southern Ireland, where it's heavily fluoridated, are much greater, in fact up to 450 times greater than they are in Northern Ireland for the same kinds of chronic illness.
Can you explain some of the health effects that is caused by ingesting fluoride?
Well, the really big health effect by ingesting fluoridation chemicals or an excessive exposure to fluoride substances in the human body is fluorosis. And there are two kinds of fluorosis. The first is dental fluorosis and the second is skeletal fluorosis. Both manifest themselves in that the fluoride substances enter the body and accumulate in either tissue or structures of the body that are rich in calcium. The bones, the pineal gland, and some of the tendinous tissues or the ligamentous tissues of the body. The problem is that the accumulated fluoride is not easily removed once it's embedded in the body. Now, when that happens, there are reactions within the body that are permanently inhibited because fluorine and fluoride are enzymatic poisons. And what that means is they inhibit the body's use and production of enzymes for the beneficial purposes that the body makes those substances for. So when the fluoride inhibits these things, the body obviously can't carry out those same functions as it once did.
You were explaining yesterday, there's differences in fluoride, and we have to address the proper one in order to be credible when we're trying to remove it and cease it from the community supply.
Yes, the issue really is one of getting to use the terms correctly. The word fluoridation to a dentist means fluoride applied to the teeth because of oral health products, dental products, and products that the dentists use in their office under supervision, professional supervision, for the benefit of their patients. My argument is not with dental fluoridation, because that's a topical application onto the teeth. It works on the surface of the teeth, and it's not my area of expertise. My area of expertise is water treatment and water distribution. And that kind of fluoridation requires the user to take treated drinking water laced with the fluoridation chemicals and then ingest them. And the idea that the fluoridation chemicals only do something to benefit the teeth through ingestion and not harm any other tissues in the body is lunacy.
First tonight, hazmat crews from all across our area responded to a chemical leak this afternoon in Rock Island. The chemical was so strong that it was burning through the concrete there. News 8's Christy Mergenthal has the latest.
It was just before 1 o'clock Thursday afternoon when hazmat crews were called to the Rock Island water treatment plant for a chemical spill coming from this tanker truck.
It's a corrosive agent that the water treatment plant uses, and there was an overflow that caused spillage out from the building onto this driveway behind me.
As plant employees evacuated, crews began suiting up, working quickly to stop the leak that had begun eating through concrete.
And they stopped the leak using some earthen berms with dirt, sand, and some commercial boom equipment, and had it contained pretty much to this facility within a short amount of time.
The chemical hydrofluorosilic acid is used to add fluoride to the plant's water. Although it poses a burn risk to skin, those living nearby were in no immediate danger.
There's no inhalation hazard at all, so there was no need for us to evacuate any residents around the area.
After several hours, crews were able to clean up the leak, allowing operations to return to normal.
They had to cordon off the area, obviously, but as far as the treatment of the water and the amount of water being used by the public, there's no effect on that at all.
In Rock Island, Christy Mergenthal, WQAD Quad Cities, News 8.
Thank you, Christy. Investigators tonight still haven't given an official estimate on just how much of that chemical spilled out.
For a chemical spill coming from this tanker truck.
Hydrofluorosilicic acid is an extremely dangerous and deadly chemical that's used in Austin. There was no mention, for example, of the material safety data sheets of how dangerous this chemical is. Number two is the fact that hydrofluorosilicic acid is also one of the most dangerous chemicals transported in Austin if there were to be a serious accident and a breaching of the container on the highway or the city streets. And a lot of people don't know the hazards associated with a spill and a breaching of one of these tankers that goes right through the city of Austin and to the treatment plants.
I also have an understanding that the chemicals that are used for water fluoridation, which is what the issue is about, are in fact waste products of the superphosphate fertilizer industry, and in a lesser degree the manufacture of uranium concentrate from the other ingredients that are also found along with the phosphate used to make fertilizer.
Can you explain a bit about the process of how it is applied to the drinking water? Certainly.
The hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is used in 94-95% of the fluoridation schemes in North America, is a liquid that is a byproduct of the phosphate fertilizer manufacturing process. It's obtained from taking water and spraying the water into the stacks of the roasting ovens, and the water is recirculated until the fluoride content reaches approximately 23 to 25% by volume. What the water is doing is it's actually taking out two gases, hydrogen fluoride gas and silicon tetrafluoride. And when those substances are dissolved into the water, we end up with this concentrate of hydrofluorosilicic acid. Now, that acid is then transferred to cooling ponds. And if anybody was to Google the central part of Florida around the city of Bartow, you will see large excavations in the ground and large phosphate fertilizer factories for an area, approximately 25 miles by 25 miles in size, perhaps even larger.
So one thing I'm going to do right now, actually, he mentioned to look up Bartow, Florida, on a Google map, which I did, and this part is in the documentary I'm working on as well. But I want to show you guys this because it's very, very. You could see it plain as day, definitely noticeable on a map. So I'm gonna get the Google Maps on the screen here. I believe the city. Bartow? Yeah. Bartow, Florida. So this is in central Florida. And what do we have here? Bartow, Florida. There it is. Now, as you can see, it's located near Tampa. But essentially, it's central Florida. Right here. Now I'm going to zoom in on Bartow and show you guys the geographical area of Bartow. Now this is pretty interesting right here. You can already see it. I clicked twice and you can already see the cooling ponds that he's talking about. Now this is this whole area here is all cooling ponds. There's some up here too, I think, but these are definitely cooling ponds. And this is the area that's producing all of the hydrofluorosilicic acid that's transported throughout North America. So this area of Florida right here is responsible for these chemicals. This is where all the plants exist. So there we have it, folks. Look at all these cooling ponds. Look at all these squared, man-made cooling ponds for the chemical plants. And it's huge. This area is massive. Look at that. Huge. That's a huge chunk dedicated to that. Right there. I mean, that's insanity. So I definitely had to show you guys Bartow, Florida, because that's a main concentration area. And that's where they produce these chemicals that are put into the drinking water supply. So I'm going to get the interview back on with Peter. And here we go.
Plants and facilities are the largest supply of phosphate fertilizer for the agribusiness industry. And the byproduct is this hydrofluorosilicic acid. But the little dirty secret is that it also contains all of the other contaminants that were in the ore when the ore was originally roasted to extract the phosphate. And those other contaminants are a plethora of heavy metals, primarily arsenic, lead, cadmium, small amounts of radioactive substances called radionuclides, polonium-210, uranium, and a smattering of other heavy chemicals. Now, these substances are not discreetly removed when hydrofluorosilicic acid is pumped from these cooling ponds into tanker trucks and magically distributed throughout North America and delivered to water treatment plants as fluoridating chemicals. These chemicals carry with them small percentages of those contaminants and measured on a pound for pound basis, I've calculated from one certificate of analysis that a tanker truck full of hydrofluorosilicic acid is delivering to a water supply an additional 8 pounds of lead that would otherwise not be in the treated drinking water. Now this is all introduced into the water supply, and it's dribbled in at amounts that essentially produce anywhere from 180 to 250,000 times dilution factor. Now to most people they would think, oh well, that's a very tiny amount. The problem is those contaminating substances, although they do not often exceed the limits allowed for those substances in drinking water once they've been diluted into the drinking water, were not substances that were in the drinking water at the levels that are now in the drinking water once the hydrofluorosilicic acid is added. So populations needlessly get exposed to higher levels of things that we do know are carcinogens. We don't have any acceptable level of allowance for poisons like arsenic and lead because of their known deleterious effects. Yet, when it's diluted into the hydrofluorosilicic acid, somehow it magically is just glossed over as being insignificant because of a 250,000 time dilution factor. I'll give you an example of what this would be like. If I was to take the 8 pounds of lead that I found in a tanker truck out of the hydrofluorosilicic acid and stand on top of a water tower in any city with a valid drinking water operations license to put chemicals into the drinking water and ask the media to film me putting 8 pounds of lead into the water supply, I'm sure a sharpshooter somewhere would pick me off before I ever got a chance to pour it in.
We had some revelations come out from the Freedom of Information Act, the request that we had, and I'll talk about that in a second. Now, the fluorosilicate compounds were substituted as an equivalent for the original sodium fluoride back around 1957, and there are two compounds. As a contrast, both the communities on the Grand River use both those compounds. One uses liquid, one uses granular. In the case of Brantford, it's granular. This is what it is, sodium silicofluoride. Nice big word, scares a lot of people off. And if you think that one's tough, the liquid one is hydrofluorosilicic acid, and that's even harder. But this is a granular substance that is made from scrubber liquor, made from drying the scrubber liquor and neutralizing the acidic component to it, but not taking out the lead, arsenic, and the radioactive substances. So those substances go into the drinking water. Now, do they exceed the drinking water parameters? No. But the problem is the drinking water parameters were put there for the source water. They were not put there for the stuff that we add to the water. So those parameters were set, not so that we could just, let's top it up to the maximum, and as long as we don't exceed the maximum, we're doing well. There's nobody in this room who's going to agree with me that arsenic or lead is something that you want to add into water as a healthy component of what you drink.
Can you explain the best methods of having it removed from the city and addressing the issue locally? Some tips on that?
It's a marvelous thing. If people want to avoid drinking fluoridated water, they're going to have to invest in their own equipment because the municipality is not going to do it for them. So, a concerned citizen would have to look at getting a reverse osmosis set up in their home, which is costly, but it's also not sustainable. Reverse osmosis machines require energy, so they need to be plugged in. So it's going to cost you in power as well as water. They also waste a phenomenal amount of water that was treated for drinking purposes in order to produce a small amount of water that has passed through the reverse osmosis process. So as a result, usually a 9-to-1 relationship exists 1 liter of consumable drinking water from reverse osmosis generates 9 liters of reject water that cannot be used other than for purposes of flushing or watering the grass, etc. And even when you do that, all of the contaminating substances are now concentrated in that reject water because they are essentially, 1/9 or stronger in the remaining mixture. And you're applying that onto the grass and the ground, or onto the street where it's going to roll into the sewers and get back into the ecosystem through the wastewater collection system. So it's a fallacy when we say, oh, well, the fluoride is just going onto the teeth and it magically gets absorbed into the body and it finds its way to the teeth and it's giving us great dental benefit. That's a crock of crap. What isn't a crock of crap is that 99.5% of the water that we do drink or do produce is not drunk. Only 0.5% of the water is actually ingested. And that means the cost of putting the hydrofluosilicic acid into the drinking water supply is 99.5% of that cost is wasted. So we maintain that it's needless, it's certainly unethical, and it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary. And these things have caused a lot of people to have great concern about municipalities who continue to fluoridate their drinking waters. In Ontario, I've calculated that the average concentration in drinking water, which is between 0.5 and 0.8 parts per million, in an average community that fluoridates, will generate just less than 1 pound of fluoridated waste per person being returned back to the natural environment through the sewer system from the water that does not get consumed but just gets passed through in a year. In other words, you can take your population and you can say roughly 1 pound per person per year is going to be the waste load of the fluoride and those co-contaminants back into your local watershed or water supply for the downstream community. Well, this contaminant material came from Florida. So essentially what we're doing is we're exporting Central Florida's waste product and distributing it equally all over North America where we have fluoridating communities.
I also have a very big concern with the source and treated water quality issues, because 99% of the fluoride that's put in the water is not consumed. We only drink about 1% of the water that is produced at the treatment facility. The rest goes down the pipe to the wastewater treatment facility and back into the receiving stream, which is the Grand River. So the net benefit here is really, why don't we just take 99% of the fluoridating chemical and run it right into the Grand River and call that a spill, because that's essentially what we're doing. And that just makes the fluoride level in the Grand River and its receiving stream, Lake Erie, that much greater. And what we're seeing is a slow increase over the 60 years of fluoridation of the levels of fluoride in the lakes. We already have a level that's double now in Lake Ontario than the National Water Quality Guideline for fluoride in that body of water. The other thing is that the products that go into water are supposed to be approved, and there's some approvals called NSF 60 and an AWWA standard, the American Water Works Association standard. None of these standards have done the health testing of this substance. If you were to write your supplier of this substance and demand the health test data, they cannot provide it. In fact, they will do everything to avoid giving it to you. Try it. And this stuff has never been proven for the effective prevention of tooth decay. 1 minute. It also is not very soluble in water, which means that 99.5% of it, it's difficult to dissolve in water. I'll just leave it at that. I have a lot of slides, so in 1 minute I need to go through the the obvious problem, lead leaching. This is Thunder Bay did something last year. They were contemplating fluoridation. They had their plant chemist do a test, and their plant chemist came up with this statement. It's in the package, so I'm not going to deliberate on it. We have arsenic and lead in the fluorosilicates, and this is out of a treatment magazine from 2000 that the single largest source of arsenic that we're putting into the water, even though it's below levels, is attributed to fluoride addition. There was a document that came out in 2006 which was produced by the National Research Council in the United States, and it was really about the fluoride compounds that we were using in water and their health effects, and they found lots of effects. Obviously, items related to toxicity. Here's the big document that I want to get to for you guys. This is the document that was produced by Philip Sutton, and it shows the errors and omissions that were done in the experimental trials on which Brantford's water was, the decision for Brantford's water to be fluoridated was based. I take it, for me, that bell is the thing that tolls.
It does toll for you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
I have one last comment, and I know you'd cut me off.
Getting a municipal council to change its habits first involves educating the council. Most municipal councils are well-meaning individuals chosen from the population by the people with the idea that they're going to perform the best possible job they can for their municipalities. That's the idea. The reality is that many municipal councillors are inundated with reams of information they have to go through before they go to a council meeting, and then get asked to vote on it, and hopefully they have done their research enough to be able to make an informed vote. With the issue of fluoridation, the subject is so highly colored and biased by the proponents of fluoridation, mainly the medical dental lobby, spearheaded in Ontario by groups like the Medical Officer of Health and the Chief Medical Officer of Health for Ontario. These people locally have been instructed by somebody provincially to hold the fort, don't give up on a public health policy, even though we don't have sufficient proof that it is safe for people to ingest hydrofluorosilicic acid, because there haven't been any health studies done, and or that hydrofluorosilicic acid is the fluoridation compound that can prevent dental decay when ingested. We don't have any of those studies. So when council is presented with this dilemma, they have to choose between believing the white-coated expert that is handed over to them from the province, or individual citizens that have taken it upon themselves to inform themselves. And most councils will tend to go with the status quo. And the reason they go with the status quo is they simply don't have the time, or in many cases the skills, to weigh the issue with any intelligence, because they feel overwhelmed by the mounds of scientific data that get pulled out when this issue comes before council. And both sides have very strong arguments as to why their position is the best. So it's a real difficult thing for councils to choose. And in the places where the councils have chosen to override the medical officer of health's advice to continue fluoridating, the sky has not fallen in on those municipalities. There has not been rampant decay because of ceasing fluoridation. All of the things that were purported to come about as a result of stopping fluoridation have just not manifested themselves. But an individual council doesn't have a lot of time to seek advice from other councils who have already made the decision beforehand. So what happens is they take the best advice they have available from whatever expert they deem is credible. So the secret for citizens is not to protest, but to get informed. And when medical officers of health or dental professionals step forward with old 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old information and flaunt that in front of council as the latest and greatest absolute truth regarding fluoridation, it's informed citizens in every case that I've been involved with who have trumped what the local medical dental authorities have trotted out and have trounced them literally with it and sent them reeling back under the rocks from which they've crawled.
Can you name some links, personal links or contact for additional information if anybody wants to get involved?
The issue about where do you get information is really important. What I've found in the 7,500 to 8,000 hours that I've studied this problem, personally, is that there was a lot of garbage information out there, and you really have to do research and dig deep for original scientific papers. In a lot of cases, those scientific papers have to be purchased. They're not available for free. So when you start to look behind the smoke and mirrors of all of the people that just keep copying the same stuff from other sources, we find that a lot of it is junk. In that regard, one of the organizations that I belong to is the Canadians Opposed to Fluoridation. And COF-COF, as it's called, is a national organization with a scientific body attached to it as an advisory board to vet the scientific material so that we can categorically state we've got the best pieces of evidence to prove our case. And that has worked for us very, very well. We also have a parallel team in Quebec, and they are very well informed and provide all of the information in the French language. So for Canadians, there's two sources of information. One is COF-COF.ca, and the other is the sister organization in Quebec. And you can find the information, the links to the sister organization for the French language at the COF-COF website. And you can also just look at any of the articles we have and hit the translate button and get a rough translation into the French language for anybody who needs to read that. If you're going to look at American sources, one of the best American sources is fluoridealert.org. And it's an organization that COF-COF Canada has close affiliations and working relationships with because our goals are the same. So we have borrowed on their information, but we have also made sure that ours is kept with a Canadian context. And I would say don't waste your time going to too many other places because you're only going to get derivatives of the originals. And when it comes time to talking to the politicians, paper wins, and the person with the most authoritative documents are going to carry the day, rather than the person who comes in with a lot of internet citations and quotes, because you really can't judge the quality of everything you find on the web.
I guess you were explaining on your the COF-COF website how you have a detailed list of all the paperwork and the dates and the times or something of what you guys have done?
Yeah, the COF-COF website is pretty extensive. It was 4 years in the making, and it came about as a result of the vote in Waterloo to stop fluoridation. All of the work and effort that went into that 4-year battle was quickly compiled and put into a repository of information so that other Canadians who wanted to take on this challenge didn't have to put in the time or the monetary resources to get the same information to have available for their local council. We provide it all free. And all we ask for is that we get quoted as the source where the information came from. So it's acknowledged that, you know, you were able to do something positive using the information we've been able to put together. And that's a pretty small fee to ask for reliable information on the status of things fluoridation in Canada.
Awesome. Do you have any last comments or things you'd like to add? Anything we might have missed?
I think for anybody who cares about wellness, for anybody who cares about good public policy being based on sound decisions made with strong underlying scientific evidence, this is an easy issue to end in the country because it just doesn't meet that test. What it takes is Canadian politicians at the municipal level, because this is where the responsibility has landed, to grow a spine and actually be involved in an objective analysis of the information. You don't have to be a scientist, and it needn't scare you, because I think most politicians are very good at smelling out a lie or an untruth when it's presented to them. And because of that fact, it's very easy for seasoned politicians to know where the truth lies. But you got to give it a chance. I also want to comment that if any individual wants to get involved in any local battle, they can also contact the COF-COF general manager at our website, and we compile a list of active groups in various municipalities across the country, and we'll disseminate the name of concerned individuals who want to help out those local groups, so that citizens are not putting up multiple Facebook pages, they're not trying to create multiple user groups for the same effect, and then this way they can band together, not squander their resources, and get the best use out of their resources for the maximum effect, which is to stop this policy.
The fluoridation of the US's water supply has been going on for over 50 years. There has never been any testing on what it actually does to the pineal gland of the brain before 1990. Let's take a look at what the pineal gland is and what it does. The pineal gland, also called the pineal body, epiphysis cerebri, epiphysis, or the third eye. It produces melatonin, a hormone that affects the modulation of wake, sleep patterns, and photoperiodic, or seasonal functions. It is and is located near to the center of the brain, between the two hemispheres, tucked in a groove where the two rounded thalamic bodies join. The pineal gland is reddish-gray, shaped like a tiny pine cone, and about the size of a pea, 8 millimeters in humans. It is often seen in plain skull X-rays, as it is often calcified. Calcification is typically due to intake of the fluoride found in water and toothpaste. Now we know it is shaped like a pine cone and is the size of a pea, and fluoride calcifies it. Let's go back to where it mentions the third eye and see what that means. The third eye, also known as the inner eye, is a mystical and esoteric concept referring, in part to the ajna, brow, or chakra, in certain Eastern and Western spiritual traditions. It is also spoken of as the gate that leads within to inner realms and spaces of higher consciousness. In New Age spirituality, the third eye may alternately symbolize a state of enlightenment or the evocation of mental images having deeply personal spiritual or psychological significance. The third eye is often associated with visions, clairvoyance, precognition, and out-of-body experiences, and people who have allegedly developed the capacity to use their third eyes are sometimes known as seers. The true function of this mysterious gland has long been contemplated by philosophers and spiritual adepts. Ancient Greeks believed the pineal gland to be our connection to the realms of thought. Descartes called it the seat of the soul. This gland is activated by light, and it controls the various biorhythms of the body. It works in harmony with the hypothalamus gland, which directs the body's thirst, hunger, sexual desire, and the biological clock that determines our aging process. When the pineal gland awakens, one feels a pressure at the base of the brain. This pressure will often be experienced when connecting to higher frequency. A head injury can also activate the third eye. While the physiological function of the pineal gland has been unknown until recent times, mystical traditions and esoteric schools have long known this area in the middle of the brain to be the connecting link between the physical and spiritual worlds. I used to think, just how far down the foxhole do I need to go to find out exactly what it is that is being hid and what is it they want from us, when all I had to do all along was to look in the other direction, behind my eyes, in the center of my brain, to see it. It all makes perfect sense now.